and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another video. On this video, I'll be doing my first explanation and ranking of the starting units for each faction in Dawn of War Soulstorm, the Ultimate Apocalypse mod, in no specific orders, and I will be putting the units into tiers from S, A, B, C, and down to F, listing out each of their stats and talking about their tactics, uses, and gameplay, with my own personal thoughts and overall rating at the end of each segment. Also, sorry if I get any of the information or stats wrong. I'm mainly just reading this off the tooltips, and it's possible that those are just incorrect sometimes. Alrighty then, let's get on to the first faction, the Necrons. Attack Scarabs, a starting melee swarm unit, has a kinda useless burrow ability that lets them hide underground to pop out later to take enemies by surprise, but nobody ever really uses that. They also have bottomless morale, as you know, they are soulless machines, a large potential squad size, a short vision, it cannot capture points, has low HP but normal, standard melee attack power, is used mainly as an early game distraction and doesn't really go beyond that. Even after you get them their single upgrade at their disposal, they're still pitifully weak. Very cheap though at 20 power, and I don't think they take up population, which is a good thing, but they have no use outside of for the first 5 minutes of the game. They could maybe be a good rush unit, but you're better off just playing normally because you don't want to waste your resources on those, and they also don't pack enough punch to even take something like a sentry gun or a listening post down without all dying. Honest rating is going to be an F tier for these. They just don't have any uses at all. Absolute bottom of the barrel. I mean, the attack damage is alright, and they have a good size swarm. They're also very cheap, but they'll just get torn apart by pretty much everything. Most emplacements will just tear them to absolute bits, and it's better to just wait on Necron warriors and use them for the early game instead. Cultist, the starting melee/ranged infantry for Chaos Space Marines, has access to both infiltrator and detector abilities after some upgrades. Can also use various abilities in battle, that being prayers to a specific chaos god, the branch that you've chosen, which gives them or allies specific buffs. Health is weak, attack is average, squad size can be large. They have a few different weapon upgrades, those being plasma guns and grenade launchers, as well as having access to sergeant units, which are actually very good sergeant units, as well as chaos banners, which are also pretty good. Average movement speed, slightly better than normal sight range, and can capture points. Used as an early and even up to mid-game infantry. You can also give them upgrades, which boost their melee damage, as well as giving them infiltrator/detector, which is useful to have, and they're one of the few starting units that can be infiltrators. And the champion is also good, like I said. The grenade launchers give them some crowd control against enemy infantry, as well as doing decent against structures. And the plasma guns are good for some anti-infantry and anti-heavy infantry damage. Overall, they're great for a starter unit, even better if you have heroes add-on enabled and they're able to level up. You can actually use them much later into the mid and even late game with heroes turned on, which is what I recommend. If you mix them in with normal Chaos Marine and Havoc Marine squads, you can do some decent damage while being infiltrated using those grenade launchers. Since being cloaked helps them not be spotted by most other infantry. Honestly, due to their flexibility, upgrades at their disposal, the overall value of the unit being priced at only 80 for the base spawn, and also being cheap to reinforce, I think at 15 each, they're the first S tier of the list. Furies, the scout slash starting melee unit of Chaos Demons. It can both become an infiltrator and detector after some upgrades. Can also vault over impassable terrain using its wings. Decent HP, high melee attack, and is the only unit in the Chaos Demons period that can capture points, making them very much vital to the flow of the game as Chaos Demons. They also lower enemy armor value with every attack, according to the tooltip. They have a high cost of 135 per squad of 3, with the total limit spawnable being 4 for some reason. They have the fastest speed of any scouting unit, but can be also killed very easily if their morale is drained if they have no connection to the warp. Honestly, not much to say personally. I barely even play Chaos Demons, but I will say just from testing it out that the biggest downside of these is the following. The spawn limit being 4, they're such a squishy unit that are also the only ones that can capture points on Chaos Demons for some reason. They also have no ranged attack, which is not amazing at all. You can't really take a ton of ground early like you can with spamming other starting units in, every other faction. They also have, I think, the highest resource cost of any starting unit. A bad HP, like I said, it can be drained very quickly. And they're not really viable at all outside of capping points or scouting, even when you do get their second tier upgrade, which requires a lot of resources, by the way, so I cannot put them any higher than C tier. They would be F tier if they did not have a really good speed. I'm sorry, Furies, but you look cool, but it doesn't really translate to gameplay usability at all. Guardian Defenders, described as an early harassment ranged starting unit. They have normal HP, normal damage, normal morale, no upgrades, squad size of normal, basic movement speed, basic sight. They can capture points and a pretty average cost of 105. And I'm using normal and basic interchangeably, by the way. Honestly, one of, if not the most average starting unit. It has very generic stats across the board. I can't really say much about this one either, as it does what it's supposed to for a decent cost. It is a good rush unit in my experience, especially if you're fighting something like Necrons or similar faction with not much in the way of rush defense. The Storm Guardian's melee cousin is literally just a melee version of it that costs the same amount, and it's like just a preference thing. Overall, I'd give the Guardians, both of them, B tier. It would be much higher if you could field higher squad sizes, given they are an early harassment unit. But you can still do some pretty cheeky rushes, and they're alright at capturing points in a decent, timely fashion. Imperial Conscripts, very large starting unit, reinforces almost instantly, and is very cheap at a base cost of 50, and only cost 4 each to reinforce. HP is weak, attack is very weak, morale is basically non-existent, no upgrades, and the only upgrade it does get affected by from the upgrade building just lets them have a bigger squad cap. Squad size can become very large, movement is standard, sight is standard, and it can capture points. Oh boy, what do I have to say about the conscripts? Well, they are by far the worst starting unit, and if I was able to, I'd put them in F- tier if it wasn't for how cheap and quick it is to reinforce them, but that does require a lot of annoying micro-clicking as they die extremely fast. They are also completely unnecessary the moment you get actual guardsmen, which are much better for only 3 times the cost. You will never see them be used outside of very early game, and that's just to cap points and maybe suicide scout out the enemy base before being immediately cut down by any random tier 1 infantry standing around. Or God help those poor guys if they run to an enemy with a fast firing automatic weapon or flamethrower, because they'll all crumble almost instantly the moment they encounter that. You know, Havocs or Flamers, etc., they just get absolutely melted. Even when they're at Veteran C3 with the Heroes add-on turned on. They don't even have the decent attack damage that Necron Scarabs do. There are legitimately no good tactics for them or uses outside of being built to die right after you're done capping points with them. Because of all of this, they fit snugly into F tier and will probably stay there until they are completely reworked in future updates of the mod, should the developers choose to do that. And I personally think they should be reworked into a sort of half-strength guard squad, half strength and half cost, instead of just the really spammy meme unit they are currently. Yeah, they're just overall really useless. F tier, bottom of the barrel, below the Scarabs. Mandrake, starting melee infantry, can take an upgrade to become an infiltrator later on. HP is basic, attack is basic, morale is basic, upgrades none, squad size is below average, movement speed is normal, sight is basic, and they are able to capture points. The melee only starting unit of the Dark Eldar, they're usually just used to cap points and not do much else, as they aren't particularly amazing at melee despite being forced to only do it. With an average cost of 105 but population value of 2 for whatever reason, I can't really recommend these as a usable unit outside of just capping points and then maybe suicide scouting the enemy base. The average cost is nice, but they also aren't really good at anything at all even after you upgrade them, with the 2 available upgrades in the Homunculus Laboratory. The population value of 2 is also annoying and will clog your infantry, available infantry slots, and I don't know why the unit even has a population value of 2, given it isn't strong enough to ever do rushes with, and usually gets chopped down by turrets or any type of early rush defense. So they're gonna have to go into C tier. Just super average, but melee only for some reason, and the pop value of 2 kills it from being any higher than C, and you can't really use them outside of the early game either. Missionary, a starting unit, question mark? Attachable support unit, faithful unit, provides squad with useful faith abilities. HP is very high for a singular starting unit. Attack is also very high for a singular starting unit. Squad size is single, morale is normal, movement speed is normal, sight is normal, can capture points. Very odd starting unit for this one. It's more of like a character / hero attachable unit, but in the form of a starting unit for some reason. A very weird design on the mod's part, and I think they should maybe change it because it feels more like a generic attachable unit with the ability to capture points just tacked on. They don't take up pop, but have a limit of 6, which is useful and understandable. They just can't get enough done on their own to really consider for the higher end of this list. They aren't bad or anything. They have a good amount of attack and HP for a single unit, and after you're done using them to capture points, you can attach them to normal infantry squads to give them a boost. They can also maybe be used as a rush unit since they have pretty chunky stats, and it would take a good minute for any other early game units that the enemy has to chop through all of that health. Overall, a solid B tier. I think the devs should seriously reconsider maybe making an actual scouting or early game unit for the Sisters of Battle instead of just giving the role to an attachable unit that probably should have just been something that you could attach to infantry squads and wouldn't have the role of a starting unit. The faith abilities are just sort of whatever though, because like most people don't bother doing any of the micro with them. Overall, pretty alright. Probably needs to be like have its role like shifted to a different unit entirely though. So into B tier it goes. Scouts. Starting unit can become an infiltrator with upgrades, but can only detect other infiltrated units using a servo skull attachable unit. HP is basic, attack is weak starting off, morale is normal, has a lot of different upgrades, squad size is very small, one of the smallest squads in the entire game in fact. Movement speed is above average, sight is good, longer than average, weapon range is longer than average when you get upgrades, and it can capture points. The classic starting unit with a very cheap cost of 80, well not very cheap, just decently cheap, used by the Space Marines. A very flexible arsenal that can fill close, medium, and long range combat roles. They're used mainly for capping points, but the sniper upgrade gives them better usability in the late game. Anti-commander niche specifically, as the long-range sniper fire can chop through most commander or hero units pretty well, as well as single unit infantry targets in general, like lone attachable units, etc. Their shotguns are also a good upgrade for jumping and piecing up enemy infantry, with the occasional knockback from the shotgun. Bolters aren't a super useful upgrade though, so I'd recommend either just going for shotguns or sniper rifles. Just ignore the bolters entirely. My only real complaint with these is that they're microscopic squad size, like 5 max, not counting the servo skull, is pitiful. And so is their damage without any weapon upgrades. They have like one of the worst melee damages of any scout unit on this list. Since they have such a good anti-commander and anti-infantry niche with the sniper rifles, a lot of people still do use them late game, and they're probably the most used starting unit late game, even without add-on heroes enabled. So they are a solid A tier. Not S tier because of both being initially weak and having such a small squad size, that and being too specialized, I feel like, compared to something like the Cultist, but still a very fine unit to upgrade and have in small numbers to take out commanders and infantry. Overall, going to be put right into A tier. Slugga Boys. Basic melee / ranged unit. Gains more strength the more closer they are together, which I think just means the more you have packed close together, they get like a minor buff. Like sort of like the partisan units from Lambda Wars. HP is basic, attack is pretty basic, morale is basic, has a lot of upgrades and is affected by a lot of upgrades. Squad size can become large, movement speed is average, sight is normal, short weapon range though, and it can capture points. The bread and butter of orcs, usually even into the later half of the mid-game even. They have the capacity to become even a serious threat to tier 3 or above infantry after you get all of the upgrades for them from the pile of guns upgrade building. Easily spammable, a little pricey for a starting unit at 120, but still pretty good for what you get. Probably a good rush unit too, but I feel like they specifically nerfed them compared to earlier versions of the game and made their damage against buildings very weak. So probably not really good for rushes. All around highly recommendable unit, with the only real weakness being the short weapon ranges and the requirement of the wogged resource just to reinforce them, which can kind of be precious in the early game before you're able to even construct a lot of banners, because you could be using that resource on building or reinforcing some of the more valuable orc infantry. They're still very powerful units and an overall great pick and couldn't be any less than A tier. But since orcs are my favorite faction at 40k and I'm very biased against them, I'm going to put them into S tier. So they are an overall S tier pick. highly recommend for early game infantry. Spine Gaunt, point capping slash distraction spam unit, also a swarm unit, provides nearby bonuses such as strength, HP regen, and production speed. Their HP is low, attack is average, morale is bottomless like all the Tyranids. Upgrades are none, and they can only be affected by, I think, 2 or 3 different upgrades from the upgrade building. Squad size can become very large and even larger with the upgrades. Movement is normal, sight is normal, and they can capture points. Yes, the Spine God, the basic unit of the Tyranids, has a weak ranged attack and a weak melee attack, but can be fielded in such large numbers for so cheaply and thrown at the enemy you will not even care. It does have a pop value of 2, however, I guess to nerf the spam. Overall, amazing to just quickly throw down and push in a wall of meat to hold off the enemy for a little bit. Probably not strong enough to rush anything but Necrons, but you can try to anyway. Honestly, pretty good unit for their role, even if their 2 pop holds them back from pure greatness. Only B tier instead of A tier though, because of the pop thing and not really being super standout in an army that already has access to a lot of amazing swarm units that are of a similar price point and similar function. Stormtroopers, basic ranged infantry. HP is above average, attack is above average, morale is basic, upgrades has a good amount, squad size above average, movement speed normal, sight normal, capture points, yes. Also another army I don't really play a lot, but however, from the testing I've done, these are also a very nice starter unit. Cheap cost at 75 with usually pretty good returns in combat, and they're usually usable till at least mid-game. Population amount of 2, so pretty standard capper type unit. Even though they are decent in combat, they might also be able to get off some rushes if you combine them with having a leader unit that could tank a majority of the damage. The flamethrowers are also nice, but not really anything to be worthy of getting them for, if you're just looking for something that has good special weapons. Overall, pretty solid A to B tier type unit, but B tier for the purposes of this ranking. I view them as a weaker version of Chaos Cultists that aren't as flexible. They maybe would have been ranked higher if they had more weapon upgrades than just the Flamers. XV-15 stealth suits. Stealth unit starts as infiltrator, can vault over impassable terrain when they get the jetpack upgrade. One of, if not the only unit marked as effective versus none, and I quote, effective versus none. HP is basic, attack is basic, squad size is very small. I think the smallest next to the Space Marine Scouts. Upgrades are few, morale is basic, movement speed is normal, sight is normal, and they can capture points. The last unit on the list, the XV-15 stealth suits, being the starting unit of the Tau, coming in at kind of pricey for the unit amount of 75 and the high reinforcement cost of I think 80, which is more than the base cost, which is kind of wacky. They also take up a pop cap of 2 for some reason, which is really annoying, and I'm guessing they did it since not as many enemy units would be able to detect stealth right out of the box. So if you tried to rush with these, it wouldn't be as annoying. And they aren't even that good of a unit to even rush with because they have, the very low HP and low squad size, so very poor DPS probably. They're used mainly to cap points and then suicide scout the enemy base as they just clog up your infantry cap. They should be disposed of immediately after you're done, having a use for them, so they can be replaced with infantry like fire warriors. Honestly, the built-in infiltration is the only really good part of this at all. Otherwise, they aren't that good and useful in the slightest. The upgrades of the shield drones and the fusion guns don't really do much for them at all, and they probably aren't even worth getting compared to just having them run into the enemy base to die so you can replace them with, better infantry. The only thing holding them back from F tier is the built-in infiltration, so into C tier they go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the tier list. As I show the final results for the list, you can take a moment to look through it and maybe tell me what you thought about it in the comments or have a suggestion for a future video. I might do a second one of these on the basic ranged units or maybe just generally the infantry units of each faction, but that'll be for another time. So until then, hope you enjoyed it, and I am out.